Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so I have Angela Navarro on the line, and she is Managing Partner and CEO of Catalyte Leadership Acceleration. Angela, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
All right, Angela. So I've been trying to get you on the show for quite some time, and I know you're busy. I know things are growing like crazy over there at Catalyte, and also because due to the Verity Leadership Assessment, which we'll talk about that and get into that further as well. But just to get us kicked off, we're going to start this episode the way that we start them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Angela, we at Mission Matters amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Angela, what mission matters to you?
I love that question, Adam. So the mission that matters to me and to the team at Catalyte is that we radically amplify leadership acceleration. Mm-hmm. We work with executives in primarily professional services and also private equity to really work with their leadership team to dig into how do they accelerate performance at the leadership level. Yeah. Those programs really enable growth talent strategies.
It's awesome. And a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of executives that watch this show, and they're looking for tools, they're looking for tips, they're looking for ways to accelerate their organization. So again, great to have you on the line, because we know it all starts with people and it all starts with leadership. So good stuff there. So maybe just to get us kicked off. So where did this whole path in business and leadership, where did all that begin for you?
Yeah, so my entire career has been in human capital, search, staffing, recruiting, consulting. That's really all I've ever done. I was in an operations role, leading operations and talent in a global consultancy, and realized in that role, so often amazing, competent, capable executives are hired that really don't have the roadmap for how do they use their leadership DNA to really amplify not only their individual contribution, but the acceleration of the entire firm. And so I had the good fortune in my time. I was formerly the president and COO of Beecher Reagan Advisors. And I know we'll talk about that a little, but we had a data set of successful professional services leaders that were performing in the top 20% of their peer group over 20 years. So we essentially built a predictor of success. And we use that assessment not for selection today, but because we know these executives are capable and competent. As I said, how do you really look in a point in time and accelerate that leader in their role, which then, of course, as you said, starts with leaders. By accelerating that leader and the leadership team, the entire firm succeeds.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things about Catalyte is that a lot of times companies, leadership assessments, things like that, just in general, obviously everybody means to do well. I'm not comparing one process or method versus another, but when you think about something like that spinoff of Beecher Reagan and the 20 years of data and just what you're able to do, I mean, it's all about measurable results here. And I know that that's a big deal for people, especially when they're making investments and kind of tracking ROI, or even just the impact of what an assessment or what a leadership training or what a new tool that they bring to their executives and their management and just employees in general, what that looks like and how it affects the organization. So I think maybe this would be we'd want to start to tell this story maybe at the beginning. So tell me a little bit more about this spinoff and kind of where that thought process to make, Catalyte a separate organization came from. Where did all that begin?
Sure. So Beecher Reagan is a global retained search firm, very specialized, serving professional services and private equity, and really taking former and current consulting leaders into those roles. So they had this data set of every successful placement they've made over 23 years. Yeah. And the clients kept saying to us, why are your people better? Why are your candidate placements better? And we decided that we'd quantify that. So we went back to that group of leaders, that's a long group of leaders, and worked with an outside consultancy to build that data set of all of those leaders that were considered performing the top 20% of their peer group. What we found was that we were having great success. 99% of placements in those appointments are in place 36 months out. Right.
Wow.
So we have that data set. And the reason we really thought about Catalyte as a separate entity, and we are a sister company, we're a Beecher Reagan company, so inextricably linked. We'd have it no other way. But that, we are using data to assess and accelerate performance. And that's really a distinctly different process that should be bifurcated from the process of recruiting. So we've separated those firms and those clouds and all of that data, so it's protected. And they're two different business strategies, but that complement one another.
So what are so, spinoff happens, obviously processes, all the things are in place. And so what's kind of the next step in bringing this to market for you and your team? Like, what was that next step?
So for about 3 years, the process that we have, the framework we built that is now Catalyte, was embedded at Beecher Reagan. It was called the Leadership Results Practice. And that's where we codified Verity, and it is powered by Hogan. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that, but we had this practice in place and we were doing great work and having great results. As we pulled these businesses apart, Catalyte still serves Beecher Reagan, and that every appointment that they offer, they have the Verity assessment to that newly appointed leader and those insights, not only to support that new leader with some navigation strategies to hit that ground running when they go to their new role, but also to the hiring firm to make sure that they have headlights on how do you really support and develop that new hire so that they can have the highest success rate.
Now, when it comes to the type of clientele you're serving, I mean, this started in the private equity finance realm. Is that pretty much still maybe some of the types of firms and companies that benefit the most from working with Catalyte?
So we serve really any executive organization that would want to accelerate leadership. Our primary clients are in professional services, consulting, tech services, business services, and private equity. And if you think about it, Hogan, which is the platform that Verity is built on, is a tool for leadership effectiveness. So we can certainly work with any senior executive team on building effectiveness strategies and supporting acceleration. But our primary client base is professional services and private equity because that's what we built the tool on.
Yeah.
So it's very relevant and predicts success very accurately. And it's just to gain those headlights to how do you support that team.
Tell me a little bit more about Hogan and the platform in general.
Sure. Hogan, we chose Hogan. We thought a lot about this, looked at lots of different assessments. And Hogan is built on leadership effectiveness. There are more than 9 people in the archival database, 27 languages, over 50 countries. So it is a comprehensive behavioral assessment tool. And we felt like it was the best fit for what we were doing. We worked with Hogan and an outside firm to build Verity. Verity is the only proprietary industry-specific assessment of its kind. So what we do is in our assessment process, we use Hogan. We also have the added layer of Verity on Hogan. So while Hogan's already, in our opinion, the best, most comprehensive leadership assessment tool for both selection and development, we then have that added layer of Verity, which is a predictor of success in senior leaders in professional services. So we have a point of view. What that gives us is sort of a point of view in professional services on how we can accelerate leadership talent.
I want to get into the weeds a little bit on the assessment itself, because as I mentioned earlier, I know there's executives and there's leadership or people in leadership that'll watch this that are looking for tools. Tell me a little bit more about the assessment and how it works.
So the assessment's painless. Let me say that.
I like that because that's the first thing. So people listening to this right now, they're driving in their car or sitting at their desk, like, okay, implementation and all that stuff. It's a thing.
It is a thing. It is a thing. I mean, when I first took it, I've taken them all.
Yeah.
right? Being in executive roles, you've taken them all. You've been to um, retreats and clinics,
Yep.
and I feel like they all have value. So none
Absolutely.
of this is to undervalue another tool or product. What we do, though, we feel like is really specific for understanding how do we accelerate talent. So Hogan. Hogan, we give the Hogan assessment in Verity. It takes between 30 and 45 minutes. There are three parts. Again, painless. It is a pretty deep debrief. It takes 2 or 3 hours, but it's because we have a so what conversation. So once you've taken the assessment, you meet with one of our executive advisors, and we have a couple of hours where we really unpack that data. And we talk to you about your leadership DNA. And we talk to you through the context of the role you're either joining, you've recently been promoted into, your talent benchmarking, you're looking to accelerate performance, whatever that might be. We use that role context and the assessment to really help you build a strategy for moving forward. So it's painless, doesn't take that long. And what we do is, I feel like everyone's been through assessments where you have that beautiful binder and it goes up on the shelf and you think
I
about
do
those
love my
things.
binders, though. I'm not
I
gonna
have a
lie. I
bunch,
like them.
right?
I don't
I
care.
do too, and I have them right
I
behind
never
me.
looked at them a second time. I'll admit that.
That's where I was going at them. And so what we do is the so what conversation, right? So we follow
Uh,
all of that work up with a 1 or 2 page
mhm.
cheat sheet that says, here are the things, here's some key focus areas
Yeah.
to help me accelerate performance. And for hiring leaders or hiring teams, how we can mitigate risks. So we really boil that down. We make the complex simple, and then we help you with some actionable, specific, pithy insights that you can use to make sure that you are striving for performance acceleration.
So I know that, everybody that takes is going to be a little bit different, but can you give me just an example of what maybe like some insights that have been taken that could come out for someone? Again, understanding they'll all be different, but just to put some, a vision
Sure.
around that.
Great question. So there are really 2 layers to it, because when you take Hogan, you're finding your bright side, derailers or dark side, and motivations. What you also get when you work with us in Verity is you also have the insights on how you would perform in a professional services environment compared to the data set of those successful leaders. So for instance, we might see that you have very high executive impact. Yeah. And you're driven commercial drive, and you care about giving back to the organization. And then as we bring together business imperatives and role context, we are able to give you literal steps that you can use to better integrate into that organization, to support diverse talent and unrepresented minorities, where you might be able to increase partner performance, where you can benchmark talent to make sure that you are hiring to not only culture fit, but culture contribution. So those are the types of insights you get.
Yeah, so it's multi-layered. Number one, it's specific, and it also gives the action items or some of the actionable things that individuals and organizations can do. So right. I feel like there's a lot of benefit there. So that getting back to just a little bit further into the idea of, and I'm picking on myself here. I get the binder, I put it away, and I love it. I feel good for many weeks, maybe sometimes months after. I always learn something. So again, not downing anybody else's system, because I benefited from many, many ones and many assessments. But
same.
What is, and I just like it. Even just hearing you use your new lingo, I'm like, oh, that's a new lingo. That's a new language to learn. I'm like, I'm in. What do I do, Angela? This is good. So even just hearing the new lingo, I'm like, oh, I like that kind of stuff, because I've seen it, by the way. I've just seen it make such a huge difference, not only in my life, but in the lives of colleagues throughout the years in various areas. I mean, for those that are maybe newer to this show, you may not know that I was in finance for almost 14 years before being in media for many years now. But that being said, I would have been your perfect candidate there, Angela, and probably still am, but for this type of assessment. So that's why it just interests me and intrigues me, and it's a great topic, and was happy to have you on the show. But going a step further there, in terms of like the follow-up and what happens next, what kind of response have you heard from this type of thing, like, and from the assessment and things like that, as you've been giving this, for over 3 years now? Like, what kind of feedback have you gotten?
So we have a very high participation rate.
Mhm.
And that is when it's voluntary, when you have to opt in or out, right? So if you're a new leader, you don't have to take Verity, right? You could just say, I don't want to do that. So we have a
The
very high
first thing,
take rate.
and that's because people talk. So if somebody else in the
Absolutely.
organization has done it and they got value, they're going to tell somebody else. So participation
Absolutely.
rate is huge. If nobody's using the tool, there's something there, period.
Right. We're about 85% on participation rate.
Wow, that's
with a
high.
100% positive feedback rate after 3 years.
Wow.
Our testimonials are of some of the most successful and accomplished leaders in professional services today. And they are saying, wow, if I'd had this tool, if I'd had this so what conversation 20 years ago, right, I would have done things differently. So what you do with it, we are there. We have ongoing performance acceleration strategies that we work with companies. Sometimes our work is assessing and handing you those insights, right? Sometimes there's executive advisory and coaching that's ongoing. Partner readiness programs where we're able to identify, help you retain and develop the next gen of your organization. Talent benchmarking, as I mentioned. So those are sort of the things we do with it. I would also say that as we, I know you'll look at our website and our, values and our mission. But one of the very key pillars we had as we built Catalyte and as we, over the years, have decided to break it out was that what seems fuzzy will be ignored. That's one of our statements. And the reason we say that is everyone can give you advice, right? Everyone can put you through a test. There's so many options out there, but this should be directly correlated to how you can accelerate as a leader. And we should be able to measure those results. So what we do is really have that intersection of science and wisdom. And that's what we do. That's the what next, right? We help you with those strategies. And sometimes that's just working with the talent team to make sure they have a strong assessment program. Sometimes that's working with, executive teams or practice areas to make sure that the ongoing performance is accelerated. And sometimes we're plugged in for talent due diligence because our private equity clients are, they're acquisitional and they're bringing in leaders from leadership teams. And we want to make sure we are looking at both the culture that they will be integrated into, but also their current culture and really help those things mesh to increase the success rate.
It's great. And I want to go further, and I like to just call it the what's more. So you mentioned a couple of things like talent benchmarking. I mean, you went through like 3 or 4 of them. So what happens is, and it's pretty logical. So, you have this great adoption rate, 85%, or participation rate, 85%. You have this great feedback rate of people that actually went through it, great testimonials. It's obvious when you're working with a partner, not just in assessments or in leadership, but in anything, you're always going to come back and say, what more? What else can you do for me? So these ongoing things that you assist with, like talent benchmarking and otherwise. You went through the list kind of quickly. Could we maybe revisit that? I want to get a feel for the what's next.
Sure. So if I were to draw, we don't have a whiteboard here, but I do love a whiteboard, Adam. So just bear with me.
Draw it in my imagination. Do I need to close my eyes?
Okay, great.
I'm there.
So
first time ever. Eyes closed. Go for it.
Okay. I think of a talent continuum. That's how I draw it. Right. Okay. And I think if it were Amsco, and I've been in talent my entire career, right? And I think about all of the problems that companies face to increase performance. And while keeping the lens on, these are people, and people are what matter. And people need to feel good about it, right? So I draw that talent continuum. And I think you would always want to know first what success looks like. If you're hiring or you are in a growth strategy, you would want to say, hey, what has success been before? What is it now? Who here emulates what we call success? And then what are the gaps? Where do you need to hire to, right? So talent benchmarking really informs a talent acquisition or talent attraction strategy. Okay, so then you're to the next step, right? And you're acquiring talent. Well, assessing new talent against the talent benchmark and against the business performance is sort of that next step. Right. So then bringing someone in and to ramp as quickly as possible, as successfully as possible, and with the highest experience rate and engagement rate. Well, that we do We call it new leader acceleration. So post-assessment, we work with Adam when he comes into his new role as a partner in a consulting firm, and we say, okay, here's your leadership DNA, here's the role context, here's the talent success benchmark for this practice area, and here is what's expected of you. And we have a constant interlock in that program with you, Adam, as the new leader, and all of the stakeholders in your success. So it's a circular process, and there's it's a pretty deep framework. It involves assessment, it involves talent strategy, and it involves executive advisory. And then we work with you for those first 6 months. And then, when we are doing this, we are showing where someone has had an 18-month time to traction or payback. Different firms call it different things. We're able to cut that in half because that person is navigating and hitting success targets because they have some layer of support that is, again, at that intersection of data and wisdom. And they also have a psychologically safe place to go when they might be struggling or trying to navigate. And then I would say I'd follow that up only at the end of that continuum to working with anyone that just that is being promoted, that we're doing partner readiness programs to make sure we take all of that data all the way through and say, who's next down in the organization that we can help you develop? Yeah. And finally, working with anyone in a transition. So that's really the talent continuum. I feel like that's what Catalyte plugs into. We serve both the people organization or the business in understanding what they have, aligning talent to their highest and best use, and accelerating performance.
It's great. And one of the things you mentioned here was, cutting that time in half. And I know this is hard to quantify. It's going to change for every organization, but something like that amount of time, cutting that in half, like what does that mean for, depending on what point a business is at, whether they're scaling, whether they're, larger established, wherever they're at, right? Like what does that mean to their revenue, to their bottom line, or whatever that particular person or whatever that sector is that influences the overall business. Like that's big.
It's
big. Like time.
I would say, time attraction is big. And there are a couple of other stats in there also, because if you're doing that with also gearing that leader or leadership team to increase followership, increase engagement scores, right? So some are more quantifiable than others, but practice growth and time to be commercially viable are pretty easy to quantify. They're very, those are important numbers.
Not to mention, and I mean this in a very nice and sincere way, but not to mention the emotional stress that leadership goes under during these times and these periods. Like if it's just taking some of that stress off of leadership, it's just a multiplying effect that, again, hard to quantify all of it, but definitely, it might be a trickle up effect, actually.
Right. I think it trickles in both directions, right? I would say that what we do, and we've heard this several times, it's self-funding. Because if you have a talent continuum strategy where you can really harness data and accelerate the performance of leaders, future leaders, grow more leaders, you can't hire your way out of the war on talent. Those days are over. So it's self-funding in that one of those seats being empty because a new non-traditional hire or a high-profile hire that started that didn't stay. These firms we work with, the sector we're in, 1 in 3 leaders leaves in the first 12 months. So if we can cut that out, if we can cut attrition by 20% at that level, if we can de-risk important diverse hires, non-traditional hires, these initiatives that firms care very much about.
Absolutely.
If you don't do something different to make sure you bring the people in to their highest success rate, you don't really cut out that risk. So it's self-funding, because one of those seats being empty, is the reason to work with a firm where you can protect the investments you make in human capital.
Yeah. And then the other part you mentioned about, grooming the next generation of leaders, right? And the next person and who's up next. So even just that part of it alone it's it's tricky, right? It's tricky. And so even that part alone, I mean, I can see it. I can see how this would be self-funding and how that would be the claim. So I get it. Well, Angela, I just have to tell you, I'm excited. Verity Leadership Assessment. I know I haven't taken it yet, but I need to. If somebody,
I think I can help you out.
I'm in.
Okay.
Seriously, I love taking assessments. I'm in. And that being said, so I know Catalyte's growing. I know you already gave us the stats on this, right? So 85% participation rate for firms. You've been doing this a long time. This was built off of a 20 plus year data set. I mean, it's tested, it's tried, it's well-oiled machine there. So no doubt there, the response rate, just, the feedback you've gotten, the testimonials, lot going on there. I have to ask, with all the growth, with everything else going on, what's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for Catalyte and the Verity Leadership Assessment?
That's a great question. So we are really called to do this work, Adam. That's what I would say. I would say what you will see from Catalyte is growth, embedding in more and more organizations. We don't do everything for everyone. Mm-hmm. That's what I would tell you is sort of different about us, right? We've very high success rate, self-funding. We're enjoying what we're doing, and we're making a difference in the firms and the leaders that we work with. Everyone on the team comes from the industries and roles we serve. We have a point of view, right? We've been in the seat where these things didn't work out, or we've had a big budget on hiring very expensive talent and it didn't work out, or we feel like people didn't track to success metrics because they weren't set up for success, right? So we're called to do this work. And what I think you'll see is more and more of us embedded in professional services, making sure that we're accelerating performance one leader at a time.
Fantastic. Well, first off, I mean, this has been great. So Angela, if somebody's watching this and they want to learn more and to connect with you and your team about the Verity assessment, about just talking about the product in general, I mean, what's the best way for them to connect?
Sure. So check our website, catalyteleadership.com. You can also email us at contact@catalyteleadership.com. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. We have a great group of folks on our team. You can reach out to any of us, and we'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. And we'll put all of those notes for the listeners. We'll put all of those notes in the show notes and the links and all that other good stuff. So you can just click on it and go on and check out Catalyte and really get connected there. A lot of value going on. And speaking to the listeners and the audience, if this is your first time engaging with or listening to the Mission Matters platform, we're all about bringing on entrepreneurs, executives, and experts, and we have them share their mission. I mean, what excites them in the marketplace, how they're out there working to make a difference. If that type of content sounds interesting to you or fun or engaging, I mean, definitely hit that subscribe button. We invite you to, because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Angela, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam.